Well, when I was given the script by the studio, they were under the impression that it was a parody of Rear Window, because the title was Bay Window. And the only resemblance it had to Rear Window was that there's a guy looking out a window, and he sees stuff. But I didn't really see it that way, and I saw it more as a behavioral comedy about characters under stress. And so we shot it at the Universal backlot in the summer of 1988. And because there was a writer's strike, we had to improvise a great deal of it, and so we did it from beginning. We shot the picture in order from beginning to end so that any ideas that came up could be incorporated into the story. All the houses on the Universal backlot are from different periods in Universal's history. When Amblin came along, Steven Spielberg's company, it took over the old backlot, and rather than raise the houses, they decided to keep them, and they moved them up the hill. So it's a very strange community where the house from Harvey is right next to the house from the House of Seven Gables and Leave It to Beaver, and it's actually not unlike California architecture, which is kind of like that. But what's interesting about it is that it's on a hill and there are no backyards in most of the houses, and so it has a strange sort of surreal quality which suited the film just fine. When you shoot on the Universal lot, one of the things that comes with it is the sound of the tours, because Universal makes more money with the tours than they do with any single movie. So the tours are really important, and for years the standard behavior has been to stop shooting when the tour comes by, because the tour is, and here we're going by the famous house, and so you have to stop. But also there are rides on the Universal tour, and one of them is the Jaws ride, which is just a little bit down from where we were shooting. And there's a guy in a boat in the Jaws ride who says, "Help, help, help, help," and when the shark attacks him. And if you listen hard, you can hear that guy screaming for help at various times in the movie. I did see Tom twice for different parts in Gremlins, the lead and another part, and both times I really liked him, but he just wasn't right for those parts, in which he reminded me of when I worked with him. Tom Hanks had just done Big, but it hadn't come out yet. In fact, I remember one day we had to let him out early because he had to go to the premiere of Big, and which benefited us because Big came out before we did, and of course it was gigantic. But Tom had already got a following from Splash, and he'd done a number of pictures up to then. But his concern on this movie was that he didn't really want to be a father, because he felt, I think, that his career was going to go in a different direction. If he suddenly became a guy who had a kid, he wasn't going to get those young leading man parts. And so we had to kind of talk him into having a kid. And I just remember him constantly saying, before we started shooting, you sure we need to have a kid here? I mean, I don't really need to have a kid. I could just, have a wife. But he finally warmed to it, and it was fine. And it was actually great for him, because it did lead to a string of more adult kind of, mature roles. This is the first time I'd worked with Bruce Stern, and Bruce is a treasure, and I had, of course, been a big fan for years. There's nobody quite like Bruce Stern in terms of his acting style, and he also is a huge Hollywood film history buff, and he knows everything about, he knows what Thomas Edison had for breakfast. I mean, he really knows all of these things, and so we would challenge each other with trivia. And he would run football pools with the crew, which made him very popular. I have since worked with Bruce a number of times, and of course, he's now on the cusp of winning an Academy Award for the picture he did with Alexander Payne, and probably by the time you see this, we'll know whether he won or not, but it's a wonderful performance, and if he doesn't get it, he deserved it.
Excuse me, pal, maybe if I can meet my... Sorry. have they done to you?
You cut your hair. I like it.
And Carrie Fisher, I had previously worked with the little-known Amazon Woman on the Moon, where we hit it off quite well because she was very funny and very bright. And it was I just asked her. I said, do you want to be Tom Hanks's wife in this picture? And she said, sure. And they were such a terrific match because they could ad-lib with the best of them, and they could just go on and on. I mean, there were scenes where they would just. There's a lot of stuff in the movie that literally was made up on the spot and is as funny as the stuff that was already in the script.
Now there's new next-door neighbors. What is their name again? The Klopeks?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a Slavic name?
I don't know.
They've been here a month. You think they're going to do something about their yard?
Klopek is a Slavic name of some sort. We never really identified exactly what it was.
Let's go, Dante. Hey! Pinocchio! Where are you going?
We have a guy with lederhosen in the picture named Hans, and so there's definitely a Middle European component to the Klopeks, but which is perfect for the movie because that's the kind of outsider, immigrant that people tend to be suspicious of in America. They always did from the old days on, and probably still are.
Oh, is this the Dante? Oh, you startled me.
My Uncle Ruben.
Well, how do you do?
You are the one who lives next door.
One of the characters, the brother, Henry Gibson's brother, is played by an actor, not really an actor, a personality named Brother Theodore. It was Theodore Gottlieb. He was a performance artist, and he had quite a history as far as the war and concentration camps and a certain macabre bent. And he had turned himself into a celebrity in New York City by doing these one-man shows of Brother Theodore. He would rant and he would rave and he would tell very strange stories.
It's funny, but I don't ever remember seeing a moving van out front, Ruben.
I don't understand that. It was parked outside all day.
He would go on David Letterman, and he was a fairly well-known guy on the East Coast. And when we were casting this part, and we saw a lot of offbeat character actors like Timothy Carey and people like that, but Theodore just seemed to be the right guy for it. He was just so, his presence was so weird. Whereas in real life, he was actually a very warm and nice guy. But his persona, which he lived, was this very strange Middle European kind of dangerous guy.
No.
He was a Holocaust survivor.
No way Wednesday night. I'm gonna leave.
This seminar could change your life, Vic. The man is a great healer.
And I'm a great bowler. And Wednesday night we're taking on Roselli Plumbing.
Well, Dick Miller's in the movie briefly with Bob Picardo, another friend of mine who I put in movies as often as possible. And they played these two garbage men who have this political difference about garbage. And originally, in one of the endings that we dropped, the two guys come out of the trunk of the car and continue their bickering, which I thought was pretty funny, but it didn't make it into the picture.
Ray, this is Walter.
There's a scene in the movie where they find a bone that they think is their neighbor's, and the camera zooms in repeatedly, and it was done for a laugh, and it gets a laugh. But I'm convinced that when I go, all of the posthumous notices of my passing are going to say, and he did this shot, and it's going to be that, and that's an example of his style, which it isn't.
What the hell was that?
Brownout. Smells like they're cooking a goddamn cat over there.
I'm gonna go find out what exactly.
Get down!
This does have a little bit of a connection with the Twilight Zone episode The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, in which a community is besieged by what they think are well, they don't know what it is. It's just a lot of strange things going on, and it turns out to be aliens. At least we didn't have any aliens. The aliens are us. When I showed the movie to Jerry Goldsmith, I had it tracked largely with Italian Western music by Ennio Morricone. And Jerry chose to not continue that motif for most of the movie, although there were sections of the picture where he did go back to a Western type theme. But the great thing about working with Jerry is that no matter what you give him, you know whatever's going to come back is going to make the movie a lot better. And I think it's a terrific score. I mean, it's one of the best scores he did for me. When Bruce Dern is planning his military maneuvers, Jerry stole from his Patton score, which was pretty funny. Well, I admire The Devil and Daniel Webster particularly, but unfortunately this wasn't the kind of movie where you're going to use those kind of clips. I mean, I like Race with the Devil, but I used it because that particular clip was exactly what I needed. And by blurring it a little bit, I got a PG. Hellzapoppin' is a movie that I found on TV when I was a kid, and it stars Olsen and Johnson, who were a comedy team, was almost forgotten today, but had made this movie version of their hit play, which had run for years on Broadway. And it wasn't even a play, it was a happening. It was just, it used the fact that it was a stage show to run through the audience, and, you know, a train came through the back of the theater, and it was a crazy series of vaudeville skits. And when they decided to make a film out of it, they figured the only way that they could actually capture that is to remind the audience that it was a film and have it start in a projection booth and have the characters constantly making jokes about the fact that they were in a movie. This also connects with Warner Brothers cartoons, which were constantly breaking the frame and reminding people that they were watching a cartoon. And so over the years, I have stolen and incorporated various aspects of Hellzapoppin' into different movies that I've done. And I've never been caught at it, because in America, Hellzapoppin' never gets run anymore because of a rights situation where it can be run everywhere in the world, but not legally in America, because it's owned by the Alexander Cohen estate, which was going to mount a Broadway revival with Jerry Lewis that never happened. And even though they own the movie, they're not interested in doing anything with it. So Universal has all the beautiful negative and all this stuff, which they can't print and they can't syndicate. And so it just sort of sits there. And Americans are the only ones in the world who don't know what a great movie Hellzapoppin' is. We had a preview of the picture, and it went very well until just in the last minute, some jerk yelled out "boring." And, of course, the studio was very upset and said, we have to change the ending. This is not unusual. They live to change endings. I once made a movie where I honestly didn't even shoot the ending. I said, I know you guys are going to change it, so let's just make the movie up to where the ending is, and then you guys can decide what you want to have as an ending so we don't waste our time. In this case, we did hire another writer and shot a couple of different variations on the ending. And I think, frankly, the one that we had originally was fine. But this one is okay, too. They're all pretty much the same. And we threw out... The question always was, what are the Klopeks up to? What are they doing in this house? What is their nefarious plan? And in the original version of the movie, we never explained what their plan was. And so when Tom Hanks was hired, and we couldn't kill him at the end of the script, which was what was called for originally, they said, well, now you've got to explain what they've been doing, and that was quite difficult because we put in all the red herring clues. And so the key was what was in the trunk of their car, and at one point it was cheerleaders, at another point it was the garbage men from earlier in the movie, and finally in the release version of the movie it's skulls. We never shot an ending where Tom Hanks died because the studio said you can't kill Tom Hanks. And frankly, he might not have even done the movie if that was the ending. But we managed to find a way to keep him alive and still have a good ending. The original ending is on the United States DVD. And the other two endings with the different things inside the trunks got lost.
Mr. Peterson, I felt awkward about having to kill you. I so enjoyed our little visit last night.
Rube's gonna do time. Going to the big house.
But, Mr. Peterson, you were not quite right about the suburbs. No, here all you have to do is take one step out of line. You paint your house the wrong shade of pink. You buy the wrong kind of car. You make one or two human sacrifices. Then when you walk down the street, everybody says, oh, there goes the weirdo.
Oddly enough, The Burbs got just about the worst reviews of any picture I ever did. It did not tickle the fancy of any of the reviewers. I think one guy, Dave Kerr in Chicago, liked it, and Jonathan Rosenbaum liked it, but nobody else liked it particularly. But the New York Times review is the one that sticks in my mind because, when you read these reviews and usually you just forget about them. But this particular phrase was so artful it stuck with me. It was Vincent Canby, I think, who wrote it and said, "The Burbs is as empty as a movie can be without actually creating a vacuum."
God, I love this street.
That is
They shouldn't put things on.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Hallo, mein Name ist Joe Dante. Ich bin zu Gast im Filmmuseum Wien. Willkommen zu Blu-ray The Burbs, meine teuflische Nachbarn. Well, I hope you have with you some sardines and some pretzels, because they are the key to understanding this movie. The entire movie is encapsulated in the sardine pretzel scene, which of course is, a highlight of my career, and also that of Tom Hanks. This is a very odd movie about very odd people, based on the concept that in every neighborhood, somebody has a strange neighbor that they think is up to no good. Whether or not that's true, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But this film was made on the Universal backlot in 1988. It was released in 1989, and for some reason has become something of a cult film. And if you want to find out why, just spin your DVD.